Hi, my name is Jason Gordon. I'm an assistant extension professor with Mississippi State University, and for this video I will be talking about Chapter 8 in your book Managing the Family Forest, which I hope at this point, after 8 chapters, that you've managed to download at least the digital copy to supplement the videos. Chapter 8 is entitled Marketing the Forest Crop, one of the most important aspects of timber management that there is, and knowing how it's not just about selling, finding a place to sell that timber. You can actually lose a lot of money that way. Profit is your motive. One thing to keep in mind is that learning about marketing means optimizing your return. I don't know if you have ever had somebody knock at your door and offering to buy your timber, and you think, well, that's more money than than I thought I would get for it. I've inherited this timber, and I didn't think I'd get a whole lot of money at all for it, so if they offer $30,000, that's great, that's wonderful, and I'll sell it to them. He's probably offering 50% or more less than what it's actually worth. So we're talking about optimizing your return when we're talking about marketing. Remember, it's very important to remember that sure, there's some bad apples in the bunch, but a timber buyer is a businessman, business person. And like any other business, they need to optimize their profits just like you as a landowner need to optimize your profit. What is forest management? Timber is a crop that needs management. It's not something you can, say, inherit and then let it go to its in its natural state. A lot of times, because of soil properties and other kinds of environmental characteristics of that site, you're not going to get a timber crop that is it might not be worth any money at all. With proper management, you can optimize your end returns, $75 to $100 per acre per year in some cases. Certainly that was the case certainly in the past. Harvesting timber is a part of forest management. What we think of in forestry is that harvesting is an aspect of regeneration, and some of the other chapters in this video series discuss that. Harvesting is not just taking out the timber, it's preparing space so that a new forest can grow. In order to accomplish what you want to accomplish as a forest landowner, you need a plan. And you've talked about this in another video. Forest management plan is like having a roadmap to know where you want to go. Same thing happens, same thing applies with marketing. First thing you want to do when you're thinking about marketing and thinking about managing your timber is to develop objectives. Consider what you want on your land. That's one of the great things that I love about forest management, is that there's a million and one things that you can do. You got to put these objectives down on paper. Think about them well, talk about them with your family and with your heirs, and make sure everybody's on the same page. This is the most important part of a plan, is outlining your objectives. Think about what the property is to be used for. Also think about if you reside on your property, or if it's a second property that you go to, and you have your home that you live in another place. This all makes a difference. What is the history of the landscape of that property? Was it formerly a field and planted in cotton that reforested? Think about your management philosophy. Do you prefer to have more of a hands-off type of management philosophy, more of a preservationist philosophy where you don't do, or more of a philosophy where you purely want to grow for profit? Think about family ownership situation. Think about what your title situation is, if you have multiple heirs on the title or multiple owners on the title. Wildlife objectives, what are you hunting again, or preservation? Soil and water and other kinds of assets and constraints on your property. These limiting factors will, to a large extent, determine how you're going to grow your timber. Whole idea of having this marketing strategy is to balance the scales. Like I said earlier, you have timber buyers who deal with this every single day, and so they know what they're doing, and it's a business for them. And so they're going to try and optimize their returns with knowledge that they have that the landowner does not have. The whole idea of having the marketing strategy is to give you a leg up when you're dealing with that timber buyer. It's very important for landowners to know what they have to sell. You have to know the kind of timber you have. You have to know the amount of timber. This is measured in terms of volume and tons. You have to know exactly what kinds of products you are selling. A plan helps you know all this. It helps you put all of this down on paper. Know the timber value according to the prices at that time, because prices fluctuate. And one thing it's very important that you do in order to balance those scales is you let that timber buyer know that you have this information. Best unit of measure about how much you know is the dollar value. Once you start talking money, that's when he knows that you know. Here's an example of prices. Now this is back a ways. This will always fluctuate. Down there at the bottom of the slide you see mscares.com. Go to the forestry extension website, timber prices, and you can get prices on a quarterly basis there. Prices are very localized, and so the prices you see on this website and the prices you see on this slide are state averages, but your prices for your timber are very much going to depend on that local area where your property is located, because it depends upon a 25 to 50 mile radius of distance between your property and the mill that you're taking your product to. So it's important to know the products that you're going to be selling when you're marketing your timber. PWD is pulpwood, pine pulpwood. You can see that generally runs, that's that first crop that's taken out, as you've learned in the other videos, and that tends to be the least expensive. We do that in order to go up into the more valuable products, which is saw timber and some other products. Chip and saw, CNS. Then you have saw timber, which is the $24.50 in this example. For hardwood, you have different prices. Pulpwood, in this case, was $4.30, and then we have saw timber hardwood as well. For you as a landowner to understand, to know about prices, you can talk with other landowners, join your county forestry association and talk with other landowners, or you can talk to your Mississippi Forestry Commission service forester. So you have a choice when you're marketing timber. You can either sell it or you can market it, which is being strategic about selling your timber. The difference can be quite a bit of money. Some questions to think about. Are you willing to sell it? What are you selling? Where is it? Because again, that makes a difference in price. How much are you selling? How much volume are you selling of wood? And do you need help? All right, for sale preparation. Besides an inventory, you want a clear title. Very important to have a clear title. In fact, a lot of times the timber buyer will go back to tax records and look for that. Air property is a huge problem in the South, and it has caused a number. It only takes one landowner to want to sell, and that creates a mess for everybody else, and can even lose your property because of that. It's called a partition sale. Make sure you have your boundary lines on the ground so the buyer knows exactly what's being sold. So make sure your boundary lines on your property are clearly marked out. Make sure that that buyer has a good map and knows exactly what that property is. And provide clear access to assure them that they can get that timber out. We'll talk about two selling methods. These are the two selling methods that we typically use in selling timber. First is negotiation. This happens face to face. It's how we're typically, oftentimes, landowners are used to dealing with it in this manner. This puts the landowner at a disadvantage if the landowner does not have all the information available to him or her. Now, it's important to remember also that when you're dealing with pulpwood, you're going to negotiate $1 per ton for that first pulpwood cut when you're doing negotiation. And negotiation is usually used in that first in that first sale. And then we have sealed bid, which is another type of selling method. In a sealed bid, you're going to, buyers will submit one confidential bid. It all starts with an invitation for buyers to submit bids. It's basically, the invitation is a letter with information about the sale, talks about the conditions, the types of timber, should answer all questions that potential buyers may have in order to attract higher bids. You want to identify the seller or the seller's agent, the location and size of the timber, the type of sale, give them volume information, how much timber is being sold, the duration of the sale agreement. So when does this sale start and stop? Or when does the process start and stop? Harvesting restrictions and conditions, and that's best management practices. That can also be additional restrictions that the landowner places on this contract. Conditions for the bid acceptance, what kind of payment is going to be acceptable, and any kinds of attachments such as maps and volume tables. So bids are opened at a specific time and place as indicated in the letter. You follow that letter, what you have written out from the beginning. You follow it word for word. The bid that is submitted is a written offer. There's only one bid per prospective buyer, and it's a written offer. And you can this actually, because there's a competition in those between those bids, and you're looking at 5 to 7 bids. Some people do 9 bids. The more bids you get, the more likely the price is going to be raised. This can result in increased price for the owner. That's when it's correctly conducted. Going on to the sale prospectus. Prospectus advertises the timber sale. So this would be what you would put out in order to, prior to getting those sealed bids. Again, you identify the owners. You would distribute this as widely as possible and this is where it's very advantageous to be part of your county forestry association, because you get you learn about where all the different places where you can submit this prospectus. Advertise it as a sealed bid, and again you describe the sale and the different details involved in the sale. One very important thing to include in this is that there's a bond that the logger can put up or the timber buyer can put up in case there's a problem, in case he doesn't follow BMPs. At least the landowner is compensated for the timber buyer not following the contract explicitly. The timber deed, you always want to have a contract with all conditions set forth that were in the prospectus. We have some example contracts. You can contact us for those. But you want to include all the information listed in and conditions listed in the prospectus. If not selling all the timber, you want to be sure to specify the limit, either in volume or geographic location, of what you are not selling and not selling. And then what's going to happen is that the buyer, once the bid is accepted, the buyer will do a title search and make sure there's clear title on that. Before hiring a consultant, you want to make sure that ownership is clearly stated in your deed. You want to avoid clouded title where ownership is not. We have multiple heirs and it's not clearly stated. List and prioritize your objectives and work on your forest management plan. Another good resource for you as the landowner is a online program, an internet program called Forest Assist. And you see the website address there. I highly recommend that. They lead you through that, lead you through the management plan through videos. It's a very good tool. Consulting services run the gamut. There's a lot of different things that consultants can do for you. Everything from inventorying. That's the very least that I recommend to you as the landowner is get a consultant to go through and inventory your stand, so you know how much your stand, how much wood you have, and how much it's worth. The consultant can mark timber to improve the growth of remaining crop trees, lay out and supervise the thinning sales and of plantation and natural stands. You can hire a consultant for each stage separately of the process, or for the entire process from harvesting all the way to planting and then selling again. That's known as turnkey consulting. Consultant will determine the best regeneration method based on your soil and your location. The consultant will supervise the site preparation and planting, and also contractor supervision, such as logging, prescribed burning, fertilization, herbicide application, wildlife. You might supervise a wildlife biologist that comes out and deals with habitat improvement. Obviously, consultant can be involved in timber sales, including the laying out of roads or mapping out of roads, log landings, skid trails, prepare the sales prospectus, which is what we just discussed, marketing the timber sale, helping to determine tax and the basis, sales supervision, supervise best management practices, ensuring the proper timber sale closeout, and tracking payments. I believe the landowner should be involved in every step of this as much as you can, but the consultant certainly will make it easier. So there's some other services that consultants provide. We pretty much already talked about those. Like I said, there's a full-service consultant or turnkey consultant, which handles everything, versus a consultant who prepares a management plan or just does a timber sale. So you look at which fits best for you. Be aware of conflicts of interest. Consultants who are also timber buyers. That's not an ethical situation for that consultant. Not always an ethical situation for that consultant to be in. So be cognizant of that. Consultant has a fiduciary responsibility to represent the landowner's best interest. There's a lot of public entities that can help you as well, but the public entities have to deal with a whole lot more people, and there's a different kind of relationship than working with a consultant. Working with a forestry consultant is similar to working with a lawyer or your family doctor. Okay? You have a very different kind of relationship with them. So a consultant, a registered forester, or a consultant who is a registered forester, has a 4-year college forestry degree. He's taken an exam with the Mississippi Board of Registered Foresters. You can find a list of consultants at this website, but you might want to consider hiring a consultant in your area first, because they might know the terrain. Lots of times we'll know the terrain very well and know the timber buyers and other situation there. So you can pull up your county and pull up some of the surrounding counties and get a list of consultants. You also want to look for a consultant that might be involved with the Association of Consulting Foresters, which is a professional organization, and the Society of American Foresters. It's very important that they're involved with the Society of American Foresters. And you also want to talk to other landowners, especially, join your CFA. CFAs are typically only about $10 to $15 per year. So all this is a process of vetting out the type of person you want to deal with. And this is very important. So like hiring an employee, you have to feel comfortable with this person that you're working with. You want somebody who's trustworthy. You want to have that person that you can have a comfortable working relationship with. Again, talk to other landowners, look up that website, make sure they're on that website. That website will have a little leaf next to each person's name. If they have the leaf, not to each person's name, but next to some people's name, if they have the leaf, that means they spend more than 50% of their time in consulting. Get 4 to 5 different candidates, just like if you're hiring somebody as an employee in your business, and have them submit their resumes with their experience, their accreditations, and some references, and then you interview them. You call the references. You might even ask the references if you can come out and see their property and take a look at what these consultants have done in the past. You want to have a contract, as always, that confirms a business agreement. In that contract, you list the principal parties, the fees, the different obligations, or the fees associated with those obligations. Are you hiring somebody that will be your consultant for the next 30 years, which a lot of people do, especially forest landowners who live outside of Mississippi? Or are you hiring a consultant just to do the inventory? In your contract, you want to have a payment method. Are you going to pay him so much for the job, or per hour, daily, acre, annual? Percent total volume or dollar amount on the timber sale might be a way that you pay. That's typically the way you pay on a final cut or a final harvest. About 5 to 10% is typically what consultants take. Talking about whether you should hire a consultant or not, my recommendation is typically when you have 40 acres or more, you want to definitely think about hiring a consultant. At least definitely consider hiring a consultant. Under 40 acres, a lot of times you can work with your service forester or extension. You can market your timber using the competitive bids that we talked about. So it depends on what kind of value your timber is and how much volume you have. Think about your first thinning versus your final harvest. Your first thinning, if you have a consultant, you might think it doesn't pay off as much. Well, first thinning is just to clear the forest. At this point, we really don't concern ourselves as much with that first thinning, that pulpwood cut, anymore as we did in the past. Our focus is on that final saw timber harvest, and that's where you're going to see the benefit of having a consultant. So it's very important to keep that in mind. In forestry, we're talking about 30-year rotations. You have to have a long-term outlook. Remember that the type of forest management employed will greatly determine the amount of revenue and the length of time to harvest age. Consulting forester can help the landowner become aware of all these different options and help you make decisions. And as with any business relationship, landowners have to carefully choose consulting forester as well as the timber buyer or logger. You have some resources there that you can go to for more information. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation on marketing the forest crop. If you have any further questions, you can contact your local county extension office.